Welcome back to Texas A&M Aggies Live, part of the Voice of College Football Network. I'm your host, Cameron Honesty, joined by my co-host, as usual, Cannon Torres. We're going to start off by kind of doing an overview of SEC Media Days last week. Texas A&M spoke on Thursday. It was obviously head coach Mike Elko alongside senior Armaj Reed-Adams, junior linebacker Torrey York, and senior cornerback Will Lee, who are all, I just kind of wrote about that tonight with Aggies Wire that, it's kind of great when you have all the core representatives outside of, quarterback Marcel Reed and a couple others that are really the players that are going to make or break your success in 2025. All three of those guys are NFL first or second or third round players going into the next cycle, and just fantastic human beings, awesome dudes, and great for us in the media to get kind of those quotes that get carried by their fan bases. Otherwise, we'll discuss that with Armaj, who's just an awesome dude. But yeah, it was an interesting day overall. I was going to go down there to Atlanta. I had some things that popped up during the week, so I didn't get to go. But our buddy Carter Carroll's at 24/7 Sports gig him, and Tony Catalina, they did a good job, asked a couple of good core questions. Some of them, when Mike Elko took the podium, some of them, you and I discussed off camera, like, look, I'm going to be honest to the Texas reporters asking about the rivalry game that's 4 months away. I don't really get that. I guess, look, if you're going to do those ask those type of questions just to get clicks or just kind of talk about, it's the Lone Star Showdown is back, which, well, we're in year 2 now. So, but look, that's not my job. I'm not going to judge them. They're doing what they feel as journalists to do. But I thought Elko handled that well, kind of saying
he definitely did.
We saw the clap back today.
Yes, we did.
In the I forget what it was. It was the high school coaches forum, Texas High School Coaches Forum. Yeah, and didn't get a lot of feed from that, so we'll go into that quickly. But finally, one of my fellow Aggie journalists put something out. He put out a short video, and I can't not laugh without talking about it. It's, Elko, who was asked by, I think, the same journalist who was there at SEC Media Days about, you think you're the flagship team in Texas, and Elko did not say that. He said that's what we're working towards. If you're Texas A&M and you're in the same conference with Texas, who is your rivalry, and in terms of recruiting battles and obviously trying to get to the college football playoff and trying to contend for championships and trying to be that, again, flagship program, everybody's working towards that, right? So it's like, what's he supposed to say? Like, no, all hail Texas? No, that's not what he's going to say. And I think that, I honestly think some in that fan base would just love them to be like, well, at least he's telling the truth, which both fan bases think that way. And that's just the fun of, Texas A&M and Texas.
That's what makes the competitiveness all the worthwhile.
Well, exactly. And that's why I do get, from that point of asking about the game, even though it's so far away, I can just say from our perspective as guys who cover this team day in and day out, we're focused on the games at the start, the games in the middle. And if they have a good enough record at the end where that game really, really matters outside of just, owning the rivalry for that year, then I understand. Because if, what we expect, and I'll get to the rest in a minute, but what we expect is that both these teams are going to be very good in 2025. We expect that this game will mean a lot to potentially getting into the playoff or playoff positioning, especially for A&M, because we do believe that Texas is going to be a 10 or more win team. We speculate that A&M could be a 9 or possibly 10 win team based on health and based on how this offense gels and how the defense improves. But anyways, getting back to that, Elko basically said, he was asked again, like, about this flagship question. He said, look, I know some of the fans in Austin would love me to say this, but I didn't say that. He kind of did with a smirk and laughed it off. And I thought that was the most genuine example of Mike Elko as a man, as a coach, and as one of the best leaders in college football right now, especially in this whole NIL world where recruits want genuine people to play under. And that has nothing to do with Sarkisian at Texas or anybody else. I think Steve Sarkisian is a very genuine coach, and I think he really does care about that program and wants to win as much as A&M does. It's just him and Elko are very different. I think Elko's more relaxed fit, which I think is great, and Steve Sarkisian's more slim cut, business-like, not a lot of humor attached to it. It's more just like straightforward. This is what we're going to do. At least Elko has some humor to some of these things. And he did that. He was pretty straightforward with discussing, all the core members of this roster, going from obviously Marcel Reed praising his leadership, offseason improvement, Torian York being one of the leaders on this defense and this team in general, one of the best run defenders in the country. And then really he talked about Terry Bussey, I thought, which we can get into next. And he's now said that twice after speaking on Monday at the San Antonio Coaches Night. He's said, like, Terry Bussey, the reason why we made that decision to make him a full-time wide receiver is something that everybody should understand by now, is that when you have these versatile type of players where they can excel at either position on offense or defense, you have to hone in on that talent and you have to make a decision quickly. And Travis Hunter is a great example of that, right? He did play both positions at Colorado, which could be good or bad. We believe he's going to play wide receiver full-time with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I think that would be the best option for that team and for him, because, when you're playing both ways, it's like dealing with injuries as a weightlifter or any other sport where you have to kind of manage it, and you have to understand, you have to manage that tread, that constant work, and you really don't want to take a break or you can't, and your body just needs rest. And so for someone like Bussey, playing two ways, I think would be more detrimental to him. And I get that people want him to play as a kick returner, see time as a punt returner or something like that. But if he's somebody who at the start of the season becomes a great option for Marcel Reed, is one of the better separators, runs pristine routes, then just keep him as a wide receiver. And then when the defense takes field, keep him on the bench. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. When talking Terry Bussey, I think when A&M first brought him in back at the back end of that recruiting class back in 2020, I believe, the end of 2024, if I'm not mistaken, in February, that battle with LSU, you could see exactly why both programs wanted this kid. You've overviewed it before, where this is a kid who could play that Travis Hunter type of role where he could excel on both offense and defense. But with him having a full off season, like we've talked about before, under Mike Elko and this strength and conditioning program as a full-time wide receiver, they are kind of projecting him to be that type of elevated playmaker that they want going into his basically redshirt freshman year or full-on sophomore year going into this next season. Now, what will that entail? Does that mean that they are going to utilize him more in that backfield like we saw glimpses of this past season? Time will tell, but I really do think that we saw those flashes of Terry Bussey last season, making a really, really fun catch along the sidelines you'll have to remind me which game, but you saw the flashes of him being a playmaker on the offensive side, and so did the staff. So we'll see when they start their training this next week, but I'm really, really excited to see the jump that Terry Bussey will take. And it's obviously apparent from SEC Media Days that Mike Elko and his staff are too.
Yeah, and that was, I think, against Texas. I think he made kind of a jump. It was like a jump pass type of ball that he I forget which corner he was going against. But again, just a high-end athlete, just one of those guys who I think the fan base is kind of just waiting to see him explode. And they saw it once, when he had that 65-yard run against McNeese and just showed off that speed. I mean, he's got another gear when he gets out in the open field. And so we talked about this a little bit, figuring out how to use him correctly is the same with Ruben Owens. It's, that Le'Veon, and we're going to get to that. He did, obviously Elko went on to obviously praise Le'Veon Moss's leadership, his final season, obviously nothing on the arrest. Elko kept it professional and just said, look, we're dealing with that in-house. We're not going to get into that, but I wouldn't expect anything to happen from that in that regard. But it did continue to prove that Le'Veon Moss is just so important to what they're trying to do in 2025, because he's going to be the lead back, which means that having that depth, and obviously he did mention, obviously Amari Daniels outside of Ruben Owens, EJ Smith as well. He said EJ Smith, who was kind of hampered with an injury last year as well, we didn't see that same player that we saw at Stanford, who he dealt with a lot of injuries there, obviously the son of Hall of Famer Emmitt Smith, as all of us who are Cowboy fans know and love. It's just very fun to think, like, when you're getting a running back room that is completely healthy, all of those players offer something different, and even your fourth string guy was a starter at a Power 4 program. Look, you should not struggle on the ground then, because then that leads to the offensive line, which he continued to praise last week and on Monday, talking about, look, we've had, I believe on Monday during the coaches' night, it was the same as kind of what he said during his media days. This is the best and oldest group we've had at Texas A&M has had since the 2020 season. What do we all remember outside of the horrific Jimbo Fisher extension that led to the buyout? That season ended at, I believe it was 9-1. Obviously, COVID, there were a couple games canceled in between. This was a team that many believe should have made it to the playoff over Notre Dame, who got thrashed by Alabama in that game and went on to win the championship. I still remember that. But that O-line with quarterback Kellen Mond, I think, Devon Achane was still on that team. He was a younger player. One of the best run blocking O-lines I have seen in a decade plus. They all, like, half of those guys are still in the NFL today, a couple starting. This is a group that, compared to what they have now, we talked about this, I think, last week. There's NFL talent. Elko has started to really harp on that at every position from tackle to guard.
Yeah, he even said at SEC Media Days, he expects a fully, big jump and uptick in the NFL caliber player that they have on the roster and NFL draft picks this next season. The exact number is kind of eluding my mind right now, but you really need to have at least 10 plus draft picks in order to kind of make that jump towards what now is going to be an even tougher road to that championship game in January. So I'm excited to see, because I do believe that Elko is right in that you are going to see a really, really not only revamped backfield with now all of their feature backs healthy, but you're going to see a big uptick in people keying in on the run. And that's just going to open it up for Marcel Reed coming into this season.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I'm not gonna spend a ton of time on this because it's scheme related, but we were talking pre-show that, and we'll get to some of the quarterback rankings at the end of the show. But the reason why we're so high on Marcel Reed is because he had games, and I would say, just to preface, A&M was not blown out of really any game outside of South Carolina, and I really wouldn't call Texas a blowout. I would call that the offense couldn't score points, and if they did, they would have won that game. That's what it was. But South Carolina came in the second half, really beat them on the ground, and that was after Le'Veon Moss was lost. And I think A&M just kind of got deflated in that way mentally, and they just kind of let South Carolina run all over them. That happens in football. We've seen it at every level where good teams just kind of falter, and then their opponent just kind of destroys them. But that's a good sign, right? That's a good sign for this team that was less talented last year, even more talented, and has more depth this year. And yeah, the schedule is tough on paper, fine. But at the same time, if, like you said, teams are going to be keying on the run because of the strengths they have, and obviously the O-line, if that O-line can just open up holes, those guys are going to just eat every down, it feels like. I mean, you got to remember that Le'Veon Moss behind the same line, which dealt with some injuries, especially in the interior, was averaging over 6.3 yards per carry. Okay, and then you had Maury Daniels, who just came up and would give you that nice burst, and one of the tougher runners, not as big, but when he finds a hole, it's going to be very hard to stop him at the next level. Now you have Ruben Owens back healthy, where, like we've said, how are you going to use him? Are you going to use him in the passing game more? Is he going to be split out wide? Or are we going to finally see him be that, attempt to be that 3-down back when given those guys a rest? But you got to figure that out, right? And then EJ Smith obviously is more of an Maury Daniels type of player that if you need him, he's ready to go. So that's going to open up the passing game for Marcel Reed, because they're going to key on the run a lot, and you're going to have Casey Concepcion, Mario Craver, Terry Bussey, Isaiah Williams, Ashton Bethel-Roman, who are all much better separators, in my opinion, than what the group they had last year. And obviously Terry Bussey was a part of that, but he was young. He didn't really know how to play wide receiver at the college level yet. We expect him to take that jump like we were just previously talking about. And so when you have that, again, Marcel has already shown accuracy. He's got to work on some ball placement stuff, which we believe he's been doing this summer. And yeah, he's got to throw that deep ball. He's got to connect on some of those because Colin Klein's offense is about short pass, run the ball, and then deep shots when they're open. So it's a great offense when it works. And I believe they got the quarterback to do it, but it all starts up front. And that's why I think Elko is allowed to be very positive this offseason. We see coaches all the time think they have the best team. But no, he has a legitimate reason to praise this group and go, look, this is why we're confident. This is why we have high expectations.
Yeah, definitely high expectations for this run game going into this next season. I mean, can you have another game like you had last year against Missouri where you see these explosions from Le'Veon Moss? You see Amari Daniels rush it in for 2 touchdowns that game. I really do think that this next season you could see stuff like that where you are just – the run is happening, and yet you can't stop it. That's the thing I really, really am wanting to see from this A&M offense going forward. But I guess speaking of Missouri, I think we kind of want to say another thing that happened at SEC Media Days that I think kind of stood out if you want to go over it. I don't know if you heard the Eli Drinkwitz comments on the college football playoff format that he suggested.
Yeah. I mean, you know a little more than I was very busy that week. We talked pre-show, obviously, and I had drips and drops. I saw it. I can always tell reactions on social media when fellow sports writers are going, "Did you see what he said?" And I go, I'm about to click on it and I go, "Oh crap, I have to do something else." And then I kind of forget. So please elaborate on that for us, Gavin.
Yeah. So Drinkwitz was asked about how they would improve the idea of the college football playoff expansion. So we already know that they're probably already vying for, if it hasn't already been approved by December 1st, they're probably going to go to a different format, and that's still being decided. But Eli, being the stand-up coach that he is, wanted to give his own idea for it, where he brought up the pro NFL leagues where they already let 44% of the NFL already in the playoff. So he was kind of saying, and I know it was kind of outlined by a lot of media outlets, like a 30-team playoff. But really what he was trying to get down to in the nitty-gritty was those teams that are already outside. I mean, if you already have 12 teams and you add 4 automatic qualifiers, everybody thinks that is limiting, is I think what he said. It's not limiting, and he went on to say that it's not limiting if you take those 4 automatic qualifiers and you divide them into 8 opportunities or 8 playing games. Now you're thinking the SEC is playing for 8, the Big Ten is playing in for 8. So if you've already expanded the bubble to 16, so you give 3 to the Big 12, 3 to the ACC, and another 1 and 1. So he was saying that you're giving 30 teams in college football opportunity to be engaged and excited, engaged in revenue. So it was basically just saying, well, we've gone this far. Why not expand it a little bit more for all of our teams in college football? So your thoughts on that, because I think there's a lot of key talking points when hearing that for the first time. I know you've had little bits and jibber jabbers thrown your way, but overall, what are your thoughts on those comments?
Look, every coach, I believe, has their own opinion on this because they believe that a fairer playing field. We've heard some of the college basketball head coaches, one in particular who's now Texas's head basketball coach, that is in favor of expansion of the tournament. And look, fairness they've kind of messed with that definition too many times. And I think that in terms of the playoffs, the old system was bad. Only having the top 2 teams at the end of the year ranked 1 and 2 playing for the national championship is always ridiculous to me because there were so many weird things that happened every year that one team had to go undefeated, win every single game, even win their conference championship game, and then the other team, they could only sustain 1 loss to a team that was ranked in the top 5 or something. It was really ridiculous, and the parity just kind of died there. You were having literally Alabama or LSU play like every year, it seemed like, in the championship game. So I think the system right now, as expanded as it is fine. I think that, yes, you want but again, Boise State made it last year, so
Exactly.
that's enough parity for me. Boise State with their blue field. I mean, that's what you're gonna. If you're gonna get that, then that's great, right? If you're gonna get an Air Force in one day, that's fine, right? But that can happen with this current system. But I just don't understand his logic. I really don't. And is he saying that in terms of, his position right now with Missouri, thinking that their team is going to sustain 3 to 4 losses and think they can still get in if a system like that, but they think they deserve it? Like, is this whole deserve thing because we play in the SEC and it's tough because we hear it every weekend, right? That it's unforgivable. If you're A&M like last year, like it sucked, right? Because you were 7-1, you beat Missouri and LSU, who were both top 5 teams at the time, I believe, at home, beat them pretty bad, right? You beat the crap out of Missouri. You came back and beat LSU 38-23. And then you just kind of do have some hiccups down the line, right? Because of Le'Veon Moss injury against South Carolina. And then, you just kind of falter against Auburn because of bad defense. But you're still playing for a potential playoff spot against Texas, but Texas was just a better team. And you just weren't ready. And then you're out and you're playing USC in Las Vegas Bowl. And look, I didn't sit there and go, man, A&M still deserved to be in. They didn't. They didn't get it done. And I just don't understand why we need to keep trying to, manipulate the system and keep basically giving every team on the planet a shot to play for a playoff spot. It just doesn't make sense to me. If this is about ratings, then don't worry, they'll do something about it. Because at the end of the day, it's about money, right? It's about revenue, and so they'll change it, right? I just don't understand head coaches giving their opinion on that, especially during SC media days. Because look, if we did a comparison to the rest of those guys, even Kirby Smart and others, they whine about the transfer portal and stuff like that, which makes sense, right? Because that affects teams and it affects competitiveness, and if you want to have discussions about fairness in that regard, I get that. But at the same time, when you start to talk about the playoffs after 1 year of this new system and you want to change it every year, it's like, look, do better, have a better team, win more games. I don't know what to tell you because that's what they tell A&M. What do you think they're going to tell A&M every year? Elko, you need to win. I mean, you see, if you look at Texas fans' comments who say they're not obsessed with A&M, but they are, it's actually kind of funny because they always have this perspective, well, he needs to do this, they need to do that. Well, they have a point, right? If you're a head coach at an SEC school like A&M who's got the NIL money, you're recruiting at a high level, you're doing well with the transfer portal, you better, and you have a good quarterback, you have all these strengths we were just talking about at core areas, then you should win 9 to 10 games, right? And if you don't, it's embarrassing. So why should you get in the playoff? Why should you have a chance to get in the playoff? So that's my opinion on that.
Yeah, and that's a good analysis of it. I think part of it is a little bit misconstrued and taken out of context, but you kind of laid it out last year after A&M lost to USC. Why would you believe that even after that, would you still have a chance to be in those playoff scenarios? Like that game, USC and A&M at that point would have been to make it in.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's kind of what...
That's his structure. Yeah, you're 100% right.
It goes through my head where if you're doing it like that, you're jumping through a whole lot of hoops. And I think Drinkwitz made the comment in good faith because he's coming from a program who would greatly benefit from having this kind of play-in style scenario. Where last year, I believe, right outside if you did 30 teams, like you could see teams like Duke or Kansas State, they would be deserving of a play-in spot because of how the format is. But even though you're trying to get that buy-in from those fans and teams, they definitely would, and there definitely would be more revenue. But I wonder at that point, what are you taking out of the game that you would have in there in the first place if you just kept it how it is? Because we know this expansion is already coming. We just kind of have to make do with what we're given, because that's just how it is at this point.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't expect this current layout and this current system to stay intact. I think that, and I just said that, I'm not going to get in the financial. It's just That's the truth. It's like when you grow up, money is everything. You got to earn a living. You got to do all that stuff. It's like the part of being a grown up, right? And another part of being a grown up is realizing that a lot of the stuff is run by money. So it's just run by ratings and eyeballs. And if you're going to get, more viewers of outside football fans, like people who kind of watch football, but they're not really football fans. NFL has a lot of those that just love their team. They're not like paying attention to the entire league like you and I do, right? Like we're like football nerds, right? That's why we do this for a living. But at the same time, they need all those eyeballs. They want all that excitement to get other viewers in. So the playoff structure being like, oh, well, could this 7-win team get to the field? That type of stuff. Like I get that. And it's just because they want to go after a model, I guess, like the NCAA basketball tournament in that way, where you can have like what's like the lowest win, like a 15-win team, like win their conference championship and then get into the tournament. Like maybe they want something like that, I guess. But at the same time, would that really garner even more excitement? Maybe it would. But at the same time, if you're paying attention to the best teams and you look back at last year, right? Who won the national championship? Ohio State. Who had the best roster? Ohio State. Who had probably the second best roster? I would say Texas or Notre Dame. Those were the final 3 teams in the entire tournament.
Yeah, you're going to have those right at the end.
That's how it is. Like I kind of loved it because the best team won. They didn't have the best quarterback, right? But they had a tough quarterback who could hit Jeremiah Smith, who's probably going to end up being the best wide receiver and possibly the number 1 overall pick. Or number 2 pick. I mean, kid's a freak of nature, but they had freakish talent at running back, at wide receiver. They had a great line. They had a great defense. They had NFL talent, the whole thing that Elko's trying to build. And look, it goes back to the whole fairness thing, right? Is that after the NIL bill was pushed through, we talked about it briefly on the show. I think I gave a horrible answer on that because I was still new to the technicalities of it. And I basically said, well, the smaller schools will figure it out. I don't know. Actually, I don't know how that's going to work, but I do know that it's just going to be harder for other schools to put more money in or equal amounts of money into football if they're trying to support the other athletic programs that aren't getting the same amount of money that, the SEC, the Power 4 is getting, right? The big program. So I don't know if that's going to help them on the field, and it's not going to, it's just, here's my scenario. I think you're going to have more blowouts, and that's not entertaining because like you said, the USC Texas A&M game would have been play in for the playoff. That was actually a pretty exciting game, right? Not for A&M. They lost at the end, but it came down to the end, right? That would work if that was the type of playing game because, Marcel Reed ran it in, they took the lead, and then USC, who's having a horrible days to the air, just kind of shredded A&M secondary and won the game. Like those would be entertaining. But then I would just see like a ton of early blowouts that are very forgettable. That if you're a broadcaster for that game, it was kind of like I felt bad for the guys doing, who was it? Tennessee, Ohio State last year. It was just a horrible game, right? Tennessee just wasn't built to beat Ohio State based on their speed and athleticism, and they just destroyed them. And I mean, they're kind of sitting there like, well, I mean, we didn't expect this. Well, no, I could have told you that Tennessee wasn't good enough to beat Ohio State, but they earned their way in. They won enough games in the SEC. They did what they had to do in the regular season, which A&M wanted to do. And if A&M won, beat Texas and then beat Georgia and got in, and then got beat pretty badly, they still did enough to get in. So I wouldn't care, right? It's like, well, they got beat, but they still did enough in the regular season.
They would have only actually had to beat Auburn, and they would have already been in that SEC championship. If I'm
actually, yeah, you're right. No, yeah, just thinking back, you are right because that, yeah, and again, we're not
going to revisit it. No, we're not going to revisit
it. No, not revisit it. I'm just saying that we're going to move on to the defensive strengths in a minute of what Elko said, and that wasn't a Marcel Reed game. That was a bad defense game. So that's what kills you at the end of the season, right? You have Texas had one of those against Kentucky almost, and then Texas kind of wielded their power and got it done, something A&M didn't do. And again, Texas deserved to be in there. Texas did what they had to do. They were the best, one of the best rosters in the country. They're what A&M's trying to emulate this offseason in terms of NFL talent, producing. And I think the number you were looking for, I think Elko said it's like 12 double digits in that area of what they believe they have, which I think he's 100% right there. And that's really what Texas, I forget how many they sent in the draft. I think it's about 12 or 13 guys. And a lot of those guys, yeah, they just developed the program and they got it done in the postseason. So it's going to be, you can do that. That's my last point on this. You can do that if you want in the future, but I just don't think it's going to last because you're just going to have a ton of early blowouts. It's not going to be fun to watch. And really, I think they're only going to get the real eyeballs later when the best teams are playing each other and you get the best games. Because
exactly.
If you get a game like Clemson, Texas, where Cade Klubnik came out as one of the top quarterbacks heading into the season, just had his coming out party there, going in, really shredding Texas's elite secondary. That's a hell of a game. That's what you want to see, even though they lost. That's what you want to see.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to kind of transition over to the comments made by Elko and the players from the defensive side of the ball. I think we can start off with a question asked to Will Lee the third this past week, where he was asked, hey, you are known as the blanket. Is there anybody else in that DB room that stands out to you as another blanket? And he wholeheartedly and immediately said it is Julian Humphrey, transferred from Georgia this past cycle. So if he is already stating that Julian Humphrey has already gotten better under this offseason program with Mike Elko, just how much improved could this secondary be on the outside? Because we saw how good Will Lee was, especially in that game against Texas at the end of the season, where he had that pick six and that lone score against them. But if you are adding Julian Humphrey on that outside, who was a highly touted recruit at the DB position coming into this program, where Elko at the end of last season already stated that he was going to make considerable changes and take over that defensive play calling. He brought in Lyle Hemphill, who is really, really familiar with the defense that he runs, and Hemphill proving that he knows exactly how to run a defense and having a top 5 defense statistically over at James Madison this past season. So I thought it was very, very interesting that he immediately outlined Julian Humphrey this past week.
Yeah, and I think that kind of playing off of that, it is good to see that he's really, telling everybody, this guy's doing really well in practice. He looks the part. This was an elite prospect coming out. The same with a lot of these guys outside of Lee, who's a JUCO product, which I'm going to be honest, I trust JUCO products a lot. I think that they're just tougher and they've been through the ringer. I mean, we go back to some of the guys on A&M's roster last year. These guys, they're going to find their way to the NFL if they're good enough, just because of their work ethic. I think Lee is just a great talent as well. So, but that combination of that swagger, he's the type of guy you need at cornerback, right? He doesn't care. He doesn't care how fast you are. He doesn't care how big you are. He's going to try to lock you down. And that's what kind of piggybacking off of that as well, is that Elko on Monday kind of continued that, basically saying, look, he is the anchor of our cornerback room. And when you have an anchor like that, and an anchor in football is basically your strongest player, somebody you can trust, somebody who can lock down that boundary, that makes everybody, including Julian Humphrey's, job easier. And I think earlier in the spring, I think it was during the spring period, during one of those press conferences, Willie also praised Jordan Shaw, their new transfer cornerback from Washington, saying he's a dog. This guy is versatile. He can play the slot. He can play outside. He obviously played in the Big Ten, so he's not shy to covering some of the best wide receivers. And that's also great, because I don't think a lot of people realize, they always say SEC is the toughest. Yes, but the Big Ten has a lot of really good receiving.
They absolutely
they always do, right? Now they have, and they have Evan Stewart now, former A&M, who I don't want to get into that, obviously. But yeah, it's, again, there's talent, there's speed. So if you're a corner in the Big Ten, you know how good it's going to be every Saturday. So if you're going to the SEC, yeah.
Yes. Well, I definitely think that there's a reason we may not have seen some of the staff kind of outlining either Jordan Shaw or Tyreek Chappelle, and that's because they both are probably going to be playing that nickel corner spot.
Yeah, I think they're going to be switching.
So it depends. Maybe if they have come out after these first couple of practices this next week and say both of them have significantly improved, especially Tyreek Chappelle coming off the injury that he had and how much rehab he had to go through. And, Jordan Shaw is not one to shy away from that competition as well. They are going to be probably splitting reps at that nickel position this next season, especially if they want a new and improved defensive secondary.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's if you have if you have those complementary players that I don't think they had last season, they had new additions that Des Ricks was always going to be raw. That's another name that I keep talking about all offseason because we just talked about that elite recruiting standard that they believe if you are a 5-star prospect, especially at the cornerback position, who Alabama really wanted to keep him, right? They really wanted him to stay. And if Nick Saban would have continued being the head coach, I think Des Ricks would have stayed and he would have developed, obviously, Nick Saban, for a lot of people who really don't know, one of the best secondary coaches as well during his time at Alabama. He started his career as a secondary coach at, I believe it was Toledo, and then kind of carried that on. So that was always his area of expertise, kind of like Elko, right? Elko has a secondary background, has developed a lot of current NFL starters. Having Lyle Hemphill there, obviously another guy who he trusts in terms of fixing the secondary and helping him in that aspect. And so you have that coaching and you have those type of players and you have an anchor in Will Lee, then you can really figure things out. So to answer your question, we're going to hear more next week during that first practice, and he's going to really talk about all that's what I'm very excited about. Finally, that's one of the reasons Carter couldn't join the show today. It's just busy, and most likely not. Next week is just very busy for all of us. Is that he's really going to go into these position groups and really start talking about how they look on the field, because we're very interested in, we know what they have on paper, but those unknowns, especially the secondary, I would call it more of an unknown still, because even going into the safety group, you've got a ton of talent, right? You've got speed and athleticism with Dalton Brooks, Bryce Anderson, Marcus Radcliffe, Miles Davis, who's another name, very hard-hitting safety who's kind of coming up. And so, but you just don't know how they're going to look, because that rotation was fast and got to the ball a lot, but Dalton Brooks missed a lot of tackles last year. Anderson was very, very shaky in coverage. And again, this was a high school quarterback, to give him a little grace of saying, look, it does take some time to really perfect the safety position, especially with the speed of the game at today's college level. But that's mainly why Hemphill was brought in, right? To really fix those little things in between, to work on that eye discipline. Like, if you play in the SEC as long as Anderson has, like, you kind of have to know what they're about to do in the passing game. You have to be there. You have to, and he had that pick 6 against Florida. He has the ability, right? And Dalton Brooks, like when we talk about the college football 26 ratings, I think he was like an 87.
Yeah.
They obviously think a lot of him, and I get that, because he is a freakish athlete who could play pretty much any position at this point outside of quarterback. And so I just want to hear more about both those groups and how they're looking and the depth there, because we haven't heard a ton about the safety depth so far. I think Elko did mention on Monday, kind of said, I think the safety rotation will be improved, which, again, that's vague, so you have to really get into the nitty-gritty of it. But I think the fact that he's talking so glowingly about this cornerback rotation is just such a great deal, because you didn't really have that much last year. There were so many things you didn't know. You didn't know how good Will Lee was going to be, because he came from the transfer portal. You knew he was a great coverage guy, but you didn't know how he was going to fit right away. But now you have those pieces in place where, you have to figure out, is this going to be a 50-50 thing in the slot with Chappelle and Shaw, thank you. Then on the outside,
what else is he supposed to say? Is he going to trash the DB room?
No, I agree with you. But no, sometimes you do hear coaches kind of just ignore other areas. They focus on the good. And then when you ask them about the areas or some concern, they'll be like, well, they're coming along, right? They're coming along. And so that's kind of the communication I'm taking from, is that he's been praising this group and their improvement. So I think that's a very good sign, because we didn't see that as much, where when he's constantly praising Marcel Reed, the running back room, the O-line, even pretty much every position group right now, even the defensive line we'll get to in a second. But it does show like he's got a lot of confidence, because when he brought in this coaching, when he kind of changed things up, and he feels that he saw the issues down the stretch. Most of them were defensive. Yeah, some of them were offensive and passing game, but most of them were defensive. Most of them were in the secondary, and most of them were the lack of pass rush. And he feels like all these new additions and the guys who have returned, look, they've got the experience. They can watch the film. I was talking to somebody the other day. If you're that cornerback room, just turn on the Auburn film. Just go, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Okay, there you go. Like, that's seriously, I'm not kidding you when I say that, because they actually played pretty well against Texas, right? Now, granted, Quinn Ewers was, as we found out later in the offseason, was dealing with like a hip injury or something, so he wasn't very mobile. But still, they held their own against outside of a couple passes. And so it wasn't like they were horrific. But if they take that next step, then this is the reason why A&M's defense, including Pro Football Focus, ranked them, I think, is like the 9th defense, nationally last week. Then they are going to take that jump.
Definitely going to take that jump. So before we move on to our DBs or our defensive line, if any of y'all are listening, please let us know who you believe is going to take the largest jump in our DB room. So this defensive line, I don't know if you had a specific comment that you wanted to take from Elko or any of the players, but kind of what are your thoughts coming out of these SEC media days, or a specific comment on where this defensive line group is going to be going into this first game at against UTSA?
Well, I think it's the expectation. So I think that he did reference, obviously, DJ Hicks having to have his best season, because he is a junior. This is his third year. This is his second year as a starter. He's certainly proven that he's one of the strongest, more athletic defensive tackle prospects coming out. Obviously, he was kind of buried on the depth chart a little bit during his first 2 seasons. But this is his shot. Like, this is his shot to really show off. I was a 5-star prospect for a reason. I'm now the guy, sharing that title, right, because of the new addition of Tyler Odienum from Iowa State, who's one of the more versatile defensive linemen who could, played in a 3-4 system. So he can really play strong in defensive end, and he can play defensive tackle. He's going to really switch at that 3 tech position. He's going to rotate in. And the other name that Elko did praise on Monday during Coach's Night was Albert Regis. And I don't know if we talked about Albert Regis that much on the show, but this is another guy where, again, I think he had 6 pass deflections last year and 34 tackles as a defensive lineman. Elko loves this guy. And
right.
This was a praise. This was incredible leader, extremely talented. And again, he's talking about a 300-pound defensive tackle who's a redshirt senior, right? And it wasn't a name throughout the offseason because of DJ Hicks' recruiting status. We talked more about that because you just have heightened expectations because he was, referencing like Brandon Arrington. He was kind of that guy for the defensive tackle.
Yeah.
Right? Is, two programs are vying, almost went to the other, chose A&M, and it's like, whoa, like that's a huge win for A&M. But because of all those guys in front of him, he just hasn't flashed consistently. But now I think this opens things up for him to be that man mover, to be a really consistent run defender, and to put some pressure on the interior and push that quarterback back, right? Because he is a freak of nature. We've seen him in the weight room. I don't expect him to have a drop off. I just expect him to improve, whether it's significantly or moderately, right? But I just think that, and the 3 edge edition. So I do love it. Dayon Hayes, very active on social media. Torin York did reference that one of the reporters asked, and if I was there, I would ask this question too, because I'm very intrigued by Dayon Hayes. Who's the player that stood out the most? He said Dayon Hayes. So Dayon Hayes, again, because of his injury issues in the past, he played at Pitt for about 2 to 3 years, played at Colorado, but again, had a lot of injury problems. But this is a great pass rusher. This is something
Colorado took him for, like, they needed this guy when Dion went into the portal hard for their team. I mean, this is a guy they pegged from the start. We're like, we need this guy. The injuries riddled him. Yeah.
And that's the thing, because when we watched the spring game, and I remember you and I think went over it and discussed it. It's so long ago now, but he was one of the guys who stood out. And granted, this was against A&M's backup offensive line, but the strength, the technique, the guy knows what he's doing, right? So if you have, and to add to that, TJ Searcy from Florida has been a guy who I think is going to add a lot to the run defense. I don't know if he's going to be one of their better pass rushers. that wasn't really his thing at Florida, but he has the length definitely to be a guy off the edge that you can fear. And then Samuel Mpemba, thank you. I always want to screw these guys' names up. Is another guy they're not really talking about too much, and that just has to do with his standing at Georgia. He was a former, I think, 4 or 5 star prospect.
He was a borderline 5-star prospect.
Borderline 5-star, yeah. And again, buried on the depth chart of Georgia. Just felt that because of the guys leaving at Texas A&M, he probably had a chance to see the field more. That's very true. I think that he's a guy I really want to hear about next week or the week after. Because we haven't really heard a ton about him. That's why it was nice to hear about like Deion Hayes is standing out, because you're hearing about the core guys, and that's going to always be the case, because that's why you bring them to SC Media Days, because they represent those positions. So that's always great. And we can, our Marjorie Adams on the O-line, really talking about, we're trying to get that maroon goon vibe back. That's what we believe we can be. And that's that 2020 offensive line that just destroyed guys in front of them. That's what they feel like they can be. And this pass rush, one of the reasons Torrey York wants this pass rush to work, make his job easier. He wants to stop the run, cover a tight end when he has to, but that's going to make the guy, if you got guys just pushing the pocket and getting the quarterback and chasing him out, having to make plays out of structure, that makes your job easier. And that makes the football play better. And it's just, I love that player perspectives are always about guys that nobody's thinking about, because they're seeing something we're not seeing on the field yet. And another name that I would say on the defensive line that you're going to hear a lot about is Marco Jones. So that's the freshman defensive end edge, who I believe he had 4 sacks in the spring game? 5, yeah. So, but again, not somebody we talked about a ton because he's a freshman. But I would not be surprised if he saw time early, just to kind of see what he's made of, go against, a starting offensive tackle at college and see what you're made of. Are you really that premier pass rusher?
Yeah. And you outlined it. And not only is it easy, like you said, but it also makes it more fun to watch on the field, right? Like if they are able to key in on these QBs 3-step dropping back, but are they able to kind of put up the numbers that A&M wanted when they brought in Nick Skirton, when they wanted these jumps from Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, and you saw how highly they got drafted because of those intangibles. So I thought it was really fun to see the trend that they went into the portal this last year and they went about it the exact same way they recruited the defensive side of the ball as well that last year out of high school, and where they took the guys like a Samuel Mpemba, a borderline 5-star recruit from his class, a TJ Searcy who has the length and the size already at Florida. They just wanted to see it on the field. They took these guys because of their intangibles. You take the athlete, you get them on campus, and you let them thrive from there.
Yeah, and you have the coaches to do it. We talked about obviously Mike Elko taking over as defensive play caller. That is very significant because he's going to really figure out what I need to use at certain times in the game, when I need to put fresh bodies in there in third down situations. Who is the guy I'm going to key in on? Obviously Cassius Howe and Riley Kennedy are 2 names that, a ton of praise from us. They've been mentioned a couple times. Obviously, I think that's just expectations, though, right? I think that they expect both those guys to lead A&M in several categories. It's the guys you don't really know a ton about that Elko has talked about, and that's what makes him a great orator right now, is that he's really informing this fan base and everybody. Look, we've got a lot of talent outside of those players, so those guys are going to be great. But these are the guys that you need to start watching, especially this fall, because they're going to start to flash. And that's just going to prove that we are one of the deepest rosters in the SEC. And that when you go into the transfer portal, you're not just trying to get bodies. You're trying to get guys who you feel are great additions in terms of fit and mentality. And if they fit that mold, then you're going to have the success that the Texas Longhorns had last year with a couple guys who ended up going to the NFL out of the transfer portal. So it's always hard because you just don't know, especially, offensively, Casey Concepcion. We're going to get to him in a minute. But having a guy like that with an elite skill set, especially after the catch, and somebody who can separate in coverage, it automatically makes your offense better. That's what you're trying to go after in the transfer portal. Like, so when you look at all the pass rushers they got, you felt that Searcy was going to help in run defense specifically and bring you some pass rush. You thought that Deion Hayes could be one of your better pass rushers. And you thought that Mpemba is just a rising player, right? Somebody who, in the right scheme and using him correctly, he could thrive as well. So it wasn't just, former 5-star guy, come on in. That's not how it works. It was the same with Des Ricks, is that you've been studying him for a while. You watched him at Alabama. You watched him in high school. You tried to recruit him. And you've always known this could be a very, very good player. He's going to have hiccups early, but if we have the right coaches in here, like a Lyle Hemphill, having Jay Bateman in a more coaching role, not a play calling role, and obviously Jordan Peterson, who we could talk about all day, and Ishmael Aristide, who've done a fantastic job on the recruiting trail, also notably great coaches and developers, you're going to finally have a group that is confident and playing very confidently and not having those oh crap, I have to see the field against this guy, allowing chunk plays and looking lost. And that's the thing they killed them last year, is that you saw the losses they had, that defense looked lost. And I think that's what Elko was addressing all offseason. It wasn't just, we got to get better in A, B, and C. It's like, we cannot have games where we got guys looking at Lenora Sellers running for 30 yards for a touchdown, bulldozing a safety, and then looking around going, what the hell just happened? Can't have that. You cannot have that. You have that, 8-4. So that's all I'm going to say.
Right? The story of how it goes.
Yeah, and that's every team. That's not just A&M, but that's every team, and that's why he feels that the defense is even more important to improve because, and we're going to transition to this now, quarterback play, obviously. We're going to kind of end the show with that. But The Athletic, and I don't have the list in front of me, but The Athletic ranked the top quarterbacks heading into the top college quarterbacks heading into the 2020 season. They did it by tiers. So it was like top 30, top 40 or something like that. And you had, I think Gary Nussmeier and Kate Klubnik were either 1 and 2. And then you really got down the list where we discussed pre-show, former Texas A&M quarterback Haynes King. I think he was like in top 15 or something. And then you had a couple guys, Fernando Mendoza, who transferred from Cal, Darren Messiah, who is the quarterback for Duke, who's really a hot name. So a couple, and then there were some guys in between that, like Dante Moore from Oregon was ranked higher than Marcel Reed, which I understand that. I think he's an elite prospect and somebody who has high NFL potential. And I'm not going to. And Tylan Green was also ranked higher, Arkansas quarterback. Look, I can understand that too. We've used that term a lot, freak of nature. He's one of those freaks of nature, just very tall. I think he's like 6'5". He runs like a gazelle, and he's got a huge arm. And he's somebody who, in Bobby Petrino's offense, could have a Heisman-like year if he had the type of weapons around him and he became that like full version of himself.
Yeah, he's someone that I look at, and I know we're stressed on time, but I've heard whispers of like, if he has a good season, he has a lot of like NFL scouting types kind of looking already his way on like, hey, if you take a jump, there could be some teams calling you up this next time come draft.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So there are some of those guys. I would dispute Haynes King because I don't think he's a good passer. I think he's more just a tough-nosed football player. If he really wants to play in the NFL, he's going to have to really show that his throwing mechanics have improved and show he has arm talent this season instead of just kind of running and getting beat up. That's probably not the greatest thing for his NFL future. But look, I love that kid. He's a tough player. He's fun to watch. But in terms of quarterback rankings, it's just I always have a hard time when you start to put like good players, just good overall players, high up instead of like if you're doing a player ranking for college football watchability. Yeah, Haynes King's like number 5 in my opinion, right? He's like top there. Like if you want to watch great college football, watch Georgia Tech because that puts it on the field every year. But
if you want football, you look at Haynes King and you go, "That's a football guy."
Yeah, exactly. And that if you're doing quarterback and you're talking about throwing mechanics, you're talking about NFL ability, you're talking about all that kind of stuff. Having Marcel Reed, who came in at number 26. Look, it was just very confusing to me, and I think it just has to do with that bias with A&M, with the national media, and I know this for a fact, does not watch every A&M game. They will watch, I will tell you, this season, and you could ask any A&M reporter, whether it's me or anybody else, they will watch Notre Dame, They may watch the first game because Texas fans will definitely watch first games. They think they want UTSA to beat Texas A&M. But they will watch Notre Dame. They will watch maybe Auburn. They will watch LSU. And they will watch Texas. And now everybody will watch Texas because that's one of the bigger games of the year. But that's it. And if you do that, you do not get a good scope on this team at all. And if you only watched like 2 games last year, you have no idea who A&M was, right? You could talk about like they had these deficiencies. And, I saw there was an ESPN article talking about one of the questions with their team was wide receiver. And I'm kind of reading, I'm like, wait, what? That's what you're worried about? Because I don't get that at all, because I would have said cornerback. We just spent 20 minutes talking about unknowns in secondary, right? You can easily put that, but wide receiver, I think we can both agree they upgraded tremendously this offseason. You get Casey Concepcion, you get Mario Craver, you get Terry Bussey coming back, and you have Isaiah Williams and Ashton Bethel-Roman, who both look like very, very good players with a ton of speed and separation skills. And if you know Colin Klein's offense, that fits perfectly to what he runs. So
100% it does.
And again, what does that do for Marcel Reed, who, if you're ranked 26, that means they don't believe in you in one aspect. That's his throw game, right? They don't believe that he's a great passer. They have not seen him throw balls like DJ Lagway, who we talked pre-show that DJ Lagway, who we believe is probably a better overall quarterback prospect just because of the arm talent. He's got a huge arm. He's got some accuracy issues. He's got to work those out. Obviously, he's going to be the guy in Florida and be relied on the same way, more than Marcel Reed will be, because I don't think his team is as good as A&M's is offensively. And even though I think they do have one of the better offensive lines as well, but he'll be asked to do a lot more, right? So he'll be judged a little more harshly. Whereas Marcel Reed just needs to do enough, right? He just needs to really move this offense forward, which means hit your quick passes. Hope that, you want guys like Concepcion and Mario Craver to get those yak yards, right? Those rack yards, and get those big games. And then that just makes it easier because you want that balanced run game. You want to hit your guys when they're open. And you're going to take the deep shot every once in a while. We talked about 5-star signing Jerome Miles, who Billy Lucci of Texags, who I'd love to have on the show one day to discuss this team. Maybe we can do that in the fall. But he was talking about what he's been hearing from camp, that Jerome Miles, who's coming off of a knee injury during the beginning of which is actually good for him. It was the beginning of his senior year, is really standing out so far. And I mean, if you got Jerome Miles standing out and you got all these other guys we just mentioned, maybe that's going to be your Noah Thomas type of replacement, because Jerome Miles is one of the bigger receivers on this team, could be a red zone threat, and very, very fast for a guy his size. So he's got all the options available. And I get that judging him based on those games I mentioned, that you just don't think he can pass, because he had some errant throws against Texas. He didn't look confident. He was also, we've said this now 100 times, I think, playing against guys like Jahdae Barron and a couple corners who are coming back to this team that are going to be high NFL draft picks. So it's very, very tough. That's why at the end of the year, if Marcel Reed has had a good year passing the ball, I don't expect them against Texas to want to pass the ball that much. I think they want a balanced attack, because Texas's secondary is going to be very good again. That's strategic. That's not because Marcel Reed is bad. That's just how you win football games. So it's like, I'll get your response on this. Do you think, and we're going to reach out, but we'll go over a little bit to sum this up. Do you think this is a fair ranking overall?
I think preseason, I think this is an aptly fair rating as of right now, because of what we outlined, where people are projecting him to be in this run-heavy offense. And I think that's kind of where they were leaning, where you have these healthy running backs. It's going to be a rush-centric offense. But could he make that jump into those top 20 quarterbacks this next season? Time will tell. So I think this is aptly rated for where he ranked, where he is right now.
Yeah. And I think the games that stood out for you, I think it's probably the same for me. I think that, and really that's why I believe in him, right? That's why I personally believe in him. If I didn't believe him, I'd say it. I'd say, look, Miles O'Neill has a higher ceiling. I'm not. No, I don't. I don't believe that. I'm not in that universe yet. I have not seen Miles O'Neal, by the way, play enough football yet to make any assertion about his future. Like, I would have to see more of that. But it was against Auburn. I mean, that Auburn game, and I think a lot of others guys I think that I've talked to, that solidified it for me. That was the game where he had to put it on his back. He threw for almost 300 yards, completed I think like 22 of 31 passes or something like that. Had 3 touchdowns, was decisive, layered the ball. He had a pass to, I forget who it was. It was one of the bigger plays in the second half. But when you can layer a ball like that and you can drop it right in that guy's hands against coverage, you can play at this level. That's all I'm saying. So I saw enough. There were also drops in that game. There were bad play calls in that game. That's why I don't blame Marcel Reed for this season, the way it ended. And I just don't understand again, I get the national ranking because they feel like all those guys are better prospects. And I think a lot of it, I see A&M fans in my comments and stuff, others that have said like, man, he looks so thin. And maybe that's why. Maybe they just don't think he's big enough. I really don't know anymore. Maybe that's why.
Maybe the national media coverage, they don't know how to quantify it yet, but I think that they will definitely see it on the field this next season when A&M takes on UTSA to start the season in week 1.
Yeah.
So I think we'll kind of end the show on that if you're okay with that.
Yeah, no, I think that really sums it up. I think that he just has to show it now. I don't think we want to do any more of these rankings discussions because I think that they're kind of round and round cyclical and they just don't.
They can be, Cameron, but honestly, that's what gets a lot of fans for football.
Oh no, that's what gets them ready. No, I agree with that. Like we do them too. I'm not gonna lie, we do them too. But I think that it's gonna be basically the first 3 to 4 games for every quarterback this season, unless they have a really bad schedule, to really understand how good this offense is and how good Marcel Reed is. Because I'll leave it here. He's gonna have to make some big time throws against Notre Dame. That's all. So if he can make those big time throws and be that gutsy quarterback that we saw against Florida last year on the road, where he did make some big time throws, then we've got a quarterback on our hands, and I don't think it's anything that A&M is going to worry about. So we will leave it at that.
Definitely. For our people listening, let us know down below where you would have Marcel Reed ranked going into this next season. We'd love to hear it from y'all. As always, please like and subscribe. We want to get this show up and running a little bit more. We want to reach a wider tier of audience. So if you have recommendations for the show as well, please let us know that as well.
Yeah, and like I said, we said last week, we're going to be doing more in-depth stuff with the team. Obviously, practice next week, going into next month. It's just football, and we are going to touch on some of your basketball updates. Obviously, you've kept your nose at the grind with recruiting, so we'll make sure to do that next week. But as always, you can follow me at Cameron Honesty on X. You can follow Cannon at Torres Cannon, and we will be back next Tuesday to probably discuss the press conference, everything that Elko said, how the Aggies looked at specific positions and all that fun stuff. So
definitely one to look forward to.
Oh, a lot to look forward to. We got a long season ahead of us. So
tune in next week, everybody.
Yeah. All right, guys, as always, gig 'em, and we'll see you next Tuesday night.